Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, FY21 Tribal Justice System Infrastructure, Training and Technical Assistance Initiative Solicitation, an overview, hosted by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. At this time, I would like to introduce Julius Dupree, Policy Advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Bureau of Justice Assistance, I'd like to thank you for joining today's webinar and your interest in the Tribal Justice System Infrastructure Training and Technical Assistance Initiative Solicitation. And actually, during this presentation, we're going to be covering a few items here. Looking at the agenda, we'll do an overview of the program. We'll discuss like the application materials, and then we'll go to the Q&A session as well. So just to provide an overview of this program, so the Bureau of Justice Assistance has a program that's called the Tribal Justice System Infrastructure Training and Technical Assistance Program, and actually it is to help tribes with strengthening their infrastructure. That is through renovation, expansion, or permanent modular or prefab facilities or buildings. And what it is really it gives tribes an opportunity to maybe look at existing facilities that are currently on the reservation and basically make, possibly if they need to renovate or expand the existing facilities, and they can use our funding to do so, or if there are existing facilities that are not that are on a reservation but are not in the condition to be able to be used for tribal justice system functions. Such, let's say you're looking to do a police department. But you don't have a building suitable for that purpose, then you may want to go ahead and look at a permanent modular option to serve that purpose. And so we do offer those options. We do not do new construction projects. I know that we get that question a lot. We used to do new construction, but we no longer do that, and it's mainly around resources, not just but mainly operational resources, because we do find sometimes when we get folks that want to do new construction projects, sometimes they may not have the operational resources to be able to run that facility. And I know a lot of the federal budgets are kind of limited as far as providing operations that way. So that's why we are where we are with the renovation, expansion, permanent modular, or prefab. And so, as I kind of alluded to, the program, it really spans the justice system, because you can use the funding to, either rehab or establish a multi-purpose justice center that includes courts, police departments, and detention centers, or you could do standalone courts, police departments, detention centers. You could also do alternative to incarceration types of facilities, where you're looking at, trying to divert folks from, incarceration and having them go through more community-based programming. There's also transitional living facilities. So when folks reenter the community, let's say they were in prison for a period of time. A lot of times we find that tribes the issue is having the folks transition back into the community once they've been incarcerated, and sometimes transitional living facilities are a way to do that. And then as of last year, we added another category, which is domestic violence shelters or programs. So if they want to use funds to do that, to stand up a domestic violence shelter or any kind of domestic violence victims-based program, I should say, then they can do that. But as it relates to programming, we really defer more to the Office on Violence Against Women and we know Office for Victims of Crime also may have some victims-related programming as well. All of our funds can only be used for infrastructure-related projects and not operational programming. So I just wanted to be clear on that piece of it. But as it relates to the training and technical assistance provider, now whoever is going to be the successful awardee of this particular award will help our grant recipients actually engage in the operational planning process, which I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. But for this particular solicitation, the TA provider will be looking at operational planning, and we have another TA provider, a training and technical assistance provider, that really focuses on the construction management piece of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about it as I go through this presentation. But in continuing the solicitation overview, I basically kind of gave you an overview of what the program does. But when you really look specifically of kind of like what it aims to do, it's really addressing staff, resident, detainee, inmate safety or security issues, or adding physical infrastructure capacity to bolster justice system services and recidivism reduction efforts. So that's what we hope that our funding, that is useful to tribes in that way. So in an effort to facilitate the implementation of these projects, we have a training and technical assistance provider that we will enter into a cooperative agreement with to assist with the operational planning that's related to facility staffing. How many staff are they going to need to stand up a detox facility, or what are the programming needs for a healing and wellness court, if that's what the tribe wants to do, as well as other operational needs. Okay, so eligibility, here you'll see the eligibility for profit organizations other than small businesses, Native American tribal organizations, other than federally recognized tribal governments, nonprofits that having a 501c3 status with the IRS, other than institutions of higher education, private institutions of higher education, public and state-controlled institutions of higher education, as well as small businesses. So if you don't fall within that eligibility criteria, then this program may not be the right fit for your organization. So we will consider applications. So let's say you're partnering with another entity to actually carry out the goals of this project. We will consider that. But that if you are partnering with another agency, then it's got to be one entity's got to be the applicant, and then the other entity would be the sub-recipient or sub-grantee. Applicants that apply and participate in partnership with other agencies also must submit a signed partnership agreement, like an MOA or a memorandum of understanding, or I think the difference with it is a memorandum of understanding. I don't think there may not be any money that transfers, but I think with the memorandum of agreement, then that really implies that there is some sort of financial transaction as part of that agreement. So just keep that in mind. The goal here, like I said, is pretty simple: supporting tribes as they improve and enhance their justice system physical infrastructure needs. The objective as far as doing that is we provide technical support and guidance to what's called BJA's CTAS Purpose Area 4 grant recipients. And for some of you who may not be familiar with that grant program, so what it is there's all the Department of Justice tribal specific grant programs, or I'm not saying all, but most of them go through a grant solicitation that's called the Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation, which is currently open. It's currently out. And So what it is this particular program actually supports the grant recipients from that particular, out of that particular solicitation, because within that solicitation, there's a number of different purpose areas. I think it's like 1 through 8, or maybe 8 purpose areas. And this program is actually purpose area 4. So if you want to become a little more illuminated or enlightened about that program, I do encourage you to go to the Coordinated Travel Assistance Solicitation and look at the solicitation and kind of get an idea and flavor of what we require for the folks that receive our grant project, or our grant funding, I should say. Okay, this project scope disclaimer, and this is what I alluded to a little bit at the outset of the presentation, but basically what this says is that if you are successful in receiving this solicitation, the scope of your of assistance you provide will really be around operational planning, more pre-construction types of activities, but also facility activation as well. So let's say that they complete the project and now they're ready to open the facility. You and your team may be asked to provide technical assistance to assist with facility activation, because as you all know, a lot goes into having to operationalize or open a facility. So that's really going to be your scope, but as it relates to the actual project management of the renovation and construction project, we actually work with a training and technical assistance provider currently that fulfills that role. And basically what they do is they'll look at the budget for the project that the grant recipient is proposing, and they'll also look at whatever design came out of the operational planning process, and then they'll try to see if those things marry up. If the budget and design, all those things comport. And if so, then we give the grant recipient the green light to move forward with construction, which means that they'll be putting out a request for proposal for maybe an architect and a contractor. But that you don't have to worry about that role. We already have a training and technical assistance provider that does provide that, but you are going to have to work closely with this particular training and technical assistance provider, just because, there's going to be regular coordination meetings to really discuss these projects, and then in operational planning and the project management piece of it, there is some overlap in that sometimes. So just so you're aware of that. All right, as far as the project deliverables are concerned, I'm just going to go through these real quick. So all these bulleted items that are listed here, are again affiliated with operational planning, assessing the proposed uses of the planned facility for impact on the tribal justice system. So basically, they may just be implementing a court, like some sort of healing and wellness court or some other program. And so what we're going to ask for the operational training and technical assistance provider to do is to actually, look at their justice system as a whole, basically in saying, okay, so how is this project, going to impact other aspects of your justice system? Because now if you have a healing and wellness court, then, maybe you're not sending as many people to jail. And now, so that may free up some, you may be able to do something else now that you're going to free up. Those people aren't being sentenced to jail, or you may need to figure out a way to just kind of make sure that the judiciary is educated about certain things that are going to be, this particular project, so that they'll know to refer people, to this particular project. So there are all these little pieces of it that it's not just about necessarily the facility, but it's also how whatever project they're pursuing may have impact other aspects of the justice system. Another thing, establishing and enhancing multi-agency cooperation and collaboration is necessary to plan and implement facilities and maximize the use of resources. So it could be that, whatever project the tribe is working on, it may be that they need to bring in other agency involvement, and that may be helpful for them to engage. So we've seen in some instances where tribes want to partner with local or state facilities to help with housing inmates or those kinds of things. And so that's kind of what we mean by establishing or enhancing multi-agency cooperation collaborations, because there may be a need to engage other organizations as part of this planning project, or this project as part of the planning process. Developing plans for staffing, operation, and management of facilities. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Assessing needs for programming and other space needs within facilities to accommodate services such as defense counsel, community-based providers to assist with diversion, correctional reentry, cultural and religious programming. Again, if you're doing a multi-purpose justice center, are you going to have, all the resources that you need to be the one-stop shop that you're proposing to be with your multi-purpose justice center? So that's an example there. Applying community-based alternatives to help control and prevent jail overcrowding. I alluded to that a little bit. I think as much as we can encourage least restrictive community-based types of programming for those offenders that do not pose a significant risk to public safety, then we want to pursue those options, because obviously they're less expensive options, and then also, the rehabilitative, long-term benefits of rehabilitation. There seems to be data to support that is the way to go. The other deliverable here is developing sustainability plans for the operations and maintenance of justice system facilities, because what we do find is that it's one thing to get a facility up and running and operational, but if you don't have a plan in place to sustain the operations, then that's going to be a problem, in the future. And so this is another area where we help out as well. Okay. Just continuing on with the project deliverables, developing and maintaining a distance learning technical assistance capacity to complement classroom training. So basically what the classroom training has entailed to date is we'll do a grant orientation. So when folks get awarded the grant, we do an orientation session where we basically give them guidance on how to implement the program or how to implement their project and the various components that they need to consider as far as implementation is concerned. And so what we do is we'll have a training for that, and that training is once a year. But what we also want to see, hopefully, is that there's some sort of maybe publications. It could be fact sheets. It could be program briefs. But really literature actually to really kind of complement the training that we provide in a classroom setting, and it could be really topic-based types of publications. Developing content for BJA's Tribal Justice webpage to assist tribes with planning process for renovating, expanding, building, and operating tribal justice facilities. That's just what it is. I mean, we do have a website up for the Tribal Justice System, the Tribal Justice System Infrastructure Program. So, we're always wanting to make sure we have the most relevant and, current information there. I know it's been a while since we've kind of updated it, but any publications or anything that comes out of your efforts, we would want to post that to our website as well. The other thing is providing assistance to tribes interested in exploring the option of contracting with establishing MOUs. So I kind of alluded to that earlier. It's just a little more specific about, if you want to establish an MOU with a nearby tribe or statewide agencies or local entities, then hopefully the TA that we provide could help tribes with that. Providing assistance to tribes interested in exploring the option. Develop and disseminate written materials that support and complement training sessions. Just continuing on, so in addition to any of the recipients of, assisting recipients for the FY that received grants under our fiscal year 21 CTAS solicitation, we also have some of the previous grant recipients that have already completed their project, but still could need some assistance in their operational capacity. I'll give you an example. I mean, we may have some tribes that they may, let's say they have a detention facility that they've implemented and they use our funds to implement that. But the capacity of the facility is kind of not at the operational capacity that it should be of a facility of that type. So what we may do is, have some technical assistance provided so that if they want to maybe repurpose some of that space for another purpose because they no longer need it to house as many people as they thought they would need for detention, then we would have a training and technical assistance provider that would work with that previous grant recipient to hopefully help them with, ensuring that they're utilizing, they're maximizing the utility of their facility, I should say. This next bullet here is working with tribes, U.S. Department of Interior. As far as working with tribes, the U.S. Department of Bureau of Indian Affairs, Health and Human Services, Department of Veterans Affairs, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and other federal agencies. We want to see, where appropriate, that you all are coordinating with those agencies. I'll give you an example. We have a number of grant projects that may receive operational funding from the Bureau of Justice Assistance to, for their detention center. And so in that instance, as far as operational planning is concerned, we're going to need to make sure that the Bureau of Indian Affairs is kind of aware of what the grantee is doing as far as their design. Now, we're going to rely on the grantee to really be working with BIA, but, it'll probably be, if it is that the grantee has to work with another federal agency, that it would be the grantee, but we would hope that you all would be there to facilitate that process as well. So that's why we have that listed in there. Now, does that happen frequently? No, it's not frequently, but I have seen instances where we have had to have our training and technical assistance provider, coordinate or communicate with another federal agency in regard to these projects. So just be aware of that. The next bullet here is participate in BJA-led tribal, federal, state, intergovernmental collaboration team in-person meetings. And so those are to be determined. We don't have that regularly, or those meetings regularly, but we do have a tribal, what's called an intergovernmental collaboration training and technical assistance effort, where you may be called upon to actually provide input or basically be part of that collaboration team because there may be curriculum, there may be training curriculum that we're developing for training in that area. So please be aware of that as well. This other deliverable, demonstrate ability to conduct a thorough assessment of project feasibility and preparedness based on the structural integrity of the facility that the tribe proposes to renovate or expand. Okay, so this is where, I was talking about there may be overlap in your roles and the roles of the construction, or the project management training and technical assistance provider, because what will happen is there will be an initial monitor site visit where at this point they're virtual, obviously, because of the circumstances where we are right now. But, when we get to the point to where they are in person, what would happen is your team, would actually conduct a joint site visit with the construction or the project management training and technical assistance provider. And as part of that, that visit, you're going to be looking at project feasibility, because basically what that's going to entail is it's going to be a formula around, how much money that they propose under the grant, what are they proposing to build, and, and also what is the structure, like is the structure of their building structurally sound? So if they want to renovate it or if they want to expand on it, is the structure so that it will be able to handle that renovation or that expansion? Because the last thing we want to do is to put, for the tribe to get our funding and put a lot of funding into a facility, and then that facility we find later on doesn't have the structural integrity to be able to support that renovation. So you as the operational training and technical assistance provider would not be doing the actual feasibility, the actual structural integrity, physical part of that, but we do have the construction, the project management team that will be doing that piece. But right now, just so you know how we're managing this, because our construction, our project management team cannot go out on site because of the pandemic, we are actually going to be potentially contracting with entities that's already within the community to be able to do the structural integrity assessment. So I just wanted to explain that. I know it sounds a little complicated, but I just don't want you all thinking that we're going to have you looking at the structural integrity of a building and making an assessment as to whether or not it's structurally sound, because that's not going to be your role. But you are going to be looking at whether the cost that they're proposing in their budget supports, the program that they're proposing, or whatever they're just like. If they're going to be doing a healing and wellness court, or if they're going to be doing a program where they're going to want to do a transitional living facility, does what they're proposing make sense on that? Okay. Continuing on project deliverables. So one of the things we like to see, prior to even going on site, is doing some groundwork. So basically, as soon as we make these awards, we like to provide all the projects to our training and technical assistance providers so that they can review the grant applications, review the project budgets, hopefully do a quick assessment, maybe say, based on my assessment, I see there's 3 courts that we got to deal with. One of the courts is a renovation project. The other one is a permanent modular facility. So, so we got to have a strategy in how we plan out the visits based on, whether maybe some risk criteria, or not risk criteria, but some certain risks that we need to look at for certain projects. All that kind of assessment, as much as we can, we want to be able to do that up front. And so we would hope that you all could help us with that piece of it as well. And another thing we like to do is, if there's a successful program, we like to, be able to share that information with the field, because, we realize that there are, there are a number of tribes that are, that are trying to strengthen their justice system. But if they can, if folks can see kind of the results of the work that, let's say a tribe put in to build a facility, and they can see that there's been something that's been completed successfully, then we would love to be able to just kind of provide like a summary of all those successful projects to the field, so that, because we find that tribes are always asking us, what are other tribes doing around the country, and, what, we like to learn about that. So that's, that's what we get out of that. The last bullet here is participating in a BJA-led grant performance review that tracks grantee or program performance along several key indicators. So what it is what BJA does is we'll take we'll do like a 30,000. We'll take certain programs. We'll select certain programs and really take a expansive look at that entire program to determine the efficacy of that program, you know, whether what we're doing is effective. So that will involve like looking at data, but we have an internal team of folks that we work with for that. But we may ask for your involvement and input as part of that process as well. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that. All right, so this next slide here just kind of gives you a snapshot of, of active grant projects that, or grant projects that we currently have active. And then as well as, so you'll see here 37 that are currently active. We do anticipate closing about 9 of those, by the end of September of this year. And then we do estimate making maybe 9 awards for FY21. So maybe that can kind of help you gauge a little bit of what the workload would look like on that piece of it. So again, just as I mentioned about touting the work that the field that the tribes are doing in the field. Here's an example of a courthouse before and after photo here. You can see they took an existing house and they actually built onto that house, and then you can see the end product there. Here's another one. This is a police station. Looks like that was a renovation project, maybe. This is a reintegration house or a transitional living facility. Again, I think they took an existing house and they renovated it. And I'm really impressed that sometimes at these budgets, I've seen budgets as low as $80,000, and they've really stretched it to renovate an existing facility to really serve their needs. And so so it's not always the big $1 million projects that are the ones that we want to highlight. So, okay. So as far as just kind of getting back to the requirements of the program. So if you're successful and you do receive the grant, you will need to report on performance measures. So it's really there's going to be the Training and Technical Assistance Management. It's a Training and Technical Assistance. I know it used to be called Training and Technical Assistance Portal, but I know that's not the name anymore. But what it is it's going to be, you're going to need to report into a database basically on performance measures. And for those of you who may have received federal grants in the past, you're probably familiar with that particular process, but the solicitation will also go more in depth about that as well. Okay, how to apply. I have here the solicitation link. You see here the BJA solicitation link. So you can just click on that link to apply. And just so you know, there's a new 2-step process this year. For some of you who may have applied last year or in previous years, we used to use the Grants Management System, or GMS. That system is no longer operational for external use, so you would not be able to apply that way. So this year, you would need to apply through the Grants.gov system, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And basically, that's the first step. So you apply through Grants.gov, and you would need to get your application. You would need to get not your whole application, but just at least there's like the cover page, or it's called the SF424, which is the cover page of the application essentially, which would have all your contact information and your authorizing official information. But that's due April 7th. And then after you completed that process, you're still not done yet, because you're going to have to submit the application itself through the Just Grants system, which Just Grants has actually replaced the Grants Management System. And so you'll need to get your application in the Just Grants system by April 21st, 11:59 Eastern Time. just to help out here a little bit with, if you're not quite familiar with our grant process, I'm listing a couple of webinars here on this PowerPoint that may be really helpful for you. We had a webinar on January 21st. It's called the funding process, first steps to applying, how to prepare now, and other considerations. So that really kind of walks you through the application, the application process. If you weren't able to catch that webinar on the 21st, not all is lost. You can see the link here to where you can access the actual presentation, or you can watch the recording. And then here's another one right below that, which I think is very important. It's the Just Grants in ASAP, and that's OJP's new grants management system. And so that's the one I alluded to, where your application must be submitted by April 21st. And so if you're not familiar with Just Grants and you would like to get an orientation about that system, please click on one of these links here. Either watch the recording or access the presentation. So Just Grants, it's new. It's a fairly new system. It has been, it was rolled out in October this year, so it's fairly new. And the reason I preface it by saying that is because, we are still getting questions about the system that we're trying to field. So it has been, we're all growing together, I should say, on this. So if you have any, Just Grants technical support issues or questions, the email information is, or the email information provided in this presentation, as well as the contact phone number, and also I think that's been noted in your chat box as well. Okay, application assistance and support. Again, I'm just kind of getting at all the resources that you can leverage to help you with this process. We have a response center called NCJRS. It's a National Criminal Justice Reference Service, and they're a resource that you should look to if you have questions about a solicitation. And there's all the phone number information listed on the slide as well. Okay, grants.gov. I talked briefly about grants.gov. That's the first step of your application process. And you can see here's all the contact information for grants.gov. Okay, and then I just wanted to, highlight, if you want to stay current on, BJA events, funding opportunities, if you're a big social media person, then here's all the social media information listed for Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And then also another important website is BJA's website. So that's where you find all the funding opportunities, publications, and initiatives as well. Okay, and then resources for funding opportunities. Again, I'm not going to go through all these because I do want to leave some time for some questions. But it's just kind of repetitive of some of the stuff I've already talked about. But if I had to highlight one thing that I did not, or a couple of things that I haven't already highlighted, the OJP Grant Funding Resource Center. So for all Office of Justice programs, grants, not just Bureau of Justice assistance, you can just click on this particular website and you can find out all the Office of Justice program funding opportunities that are out there. The one Office of Justice programs award data. So if you want to figure out where OJP made investments as far as grant awards, this is a good page where you can find that data. And then this last link here is the NIJ crimesolutions.gov. So if you want to see about, hear about evidence-based practices and certain areas, I would go look at this particular page because it's full of information about successful practices, and you can find out about those on that particular page there. So, okay, and I think at this point we're at the Q&A portion of the presentation.
that is correct, and we really do not currently have any questions. Oh, I think one just popped up. Yay!
Okay.
Can you tell us which tribes or locations? Can you tell us which tribes or locations of the tribal sites?
Okay.
Not.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a good question, and then to answer your question, it's pretty diverse. We have sites all around the country, so they're everywhere. But the highest concentration, I can say, is probably west of the Mississippi. That's probably obvious, but west of the Mississippi River. But there's a lot of different tribes that are represented in different regions around the country.
All right. This is your opportunity to ask any questions that you may have while Julius is still on the call. So we will give you a couple minutes or a minute or so to see if you have any questions that come up. If you do think of a question after the call has ended, Julius mentioned the National Criminal Justice Reference Service or the Response Center. grants@ncjrs.gov. You can email them, and they will work with Julius to get you an answer to your question. You can also call them at 800-851-3420 if you have any questions about the solicitation. All right. Julius, still no other questions coming in? Julius had also mentioned Just Grants, and there will be upcoming webinars on Just Grants between now, somewhere around mid-February through March. The dates have not been firmed up, but if you're interested in that information, I definitely suggest that you subscribe to the BJA newsletter, and you'll be alerted of those webinars. You can do that as pointed out on the slide by texting your email address to 468-311. You can also subscribe to the weekly funding newsletter that comes out from the Response Center that comes out each Friday, and they will announce webinars for solicitations such as this one, as well as the upcoming Just Grants webinars. You can do that by going to the NCJRS site, ncjrs.gov, and clicking on the subscribe button.
Okay.
All right, we do have another question. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I can't see the questions. Go ahead.
That's sure. Hold on one second. I'm having a hard time scrolling for some reason now.
Okay.
Is the main goal of this grant proposal simply to improve facilities or improve the whole system?
Oh yeah, that's an excellent question. I'd like, it's focused, whatever the project is going to definitely have a real clear goal or focus. And so if their goal is to, let's say their goal is to expand their police department to include more offices. So as a result of that expansion, they are going to be able to house more police officers. And so, because it could have been, there may have been an issue where the police department was set up so that it wasn't safe because, there were some safety issues or it could be, that's not a good example. Let's say the court. Let's say there's some safety issues around the court where the victims and the defendants are all coming through the same doors and it could be unsafe. So if the goal is for them to basically enhance the safety of their facility, and then they've achieved their goal, and we hope ultimately that basically enhances the safety of all those who frequent the court. So to answer your question, we ultimately hope that it enhances their justice system, but the project itself has a real clear focus. If that makes any sense.
Another question came through. Can the applicant focus on one of the areas, i.e. law enforcement facilities or detention centers, et cetera?
Yes, that's correct. They can focus only on one aspect. I mean, we've had projects where they may have only needed to replace a roof, or maybe they need an HVAC system. So yeah, so it can be the magnitude of the project varies. It can be something that's only one. When you're focusing on only one aspect of it, but we have seen projects where they are focusing on more than one component.
All right, Julie, that right now is the last question. If there was something, I think I started to interrupt you a little bit. If you wanted to go over.
No.
Earlier. Oh, okay.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was talking over you earlier. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
So last call for questions. We'll give you another few seconds to see if you have anything that comes up. In the meantime, I will flip over to the Just Grants informational slide. If you do have any questions or difficulties with Just Grants, you can email them at justgrants.support@usdoj.gov. You can also phone them at 833-872-5175. They are open Monday through Friday from 5 a.m. until 9 p.m., Saturday, Sunday, and federal holidays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So they are available to answer your calls at any time during this application process. Again, as mentioned earlier, the Response Center is available to help you with any technical questions about the solicitation itself. They also are open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. They are closed on the weekends and federal holidays, and they are open additional time the date a solicitation closes. I think they close like at 9 p.m. on a closing date, something like that. All right, Julie.
You know what? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think someone mentioned something about the jail surveys report. I can't. The problem is I can't see the text for some reason. Let me see. Maybe I can do. I'm trying to figure out how I can. I don't know if you see it or not. It was a Q&A kind of deal. I think it was, or maybe it's in the chat.
It's possible that it was sent to you privately. If so, then I'm not going to be able to see that, or it could have been sent in chat. Let me just look at chat real quick.
Well, I just want to make sure that I'm being responsive to every.
Definitely.
Because as it relates to the BJS, the jails in Indian country. I'm sorry, the jails report that comes out annually. I think someone mentioned that there's a list of all the correctional, or tribal detention centers that are on that list. And I see it here. I think. Okay, it's one of the presenters. Yeah, you can reference the BJS survey. Yeah, and so that does have. Thanks for providing that link, Carla. And she's right. It does have. You can a list of all active correctional facilities in Indian country. But please note that not all of those facilities that are on that list receive our funding, but some do. A subset of those do. And I think that's all I had there.
Yeah, I'm going to just do one quick look here. Another question came through. If our grant proposal were to solely focus and zone in on main things that are able to be changed, is that more of what you're looking for in this grant?
Okay. Well, what we're looking for in this grant is for like a national level agency that will be able to provide training and technical assistance to the tribes throughout the country, basically. So it's not necessarily. I mean, just to be clear, it's not something that we can get a site-based like if you're a federally recognized tribe and you want to get funding from this program, then that's not, you would not be eligible for that. But you would have to be an organization that's going to be willing to basically all those deliverables that I laid out earlier. That's going to be able to deliver on that as far as providing training and technical assistance to tribes that receive our grant funds. I hope that helps clarify that. Or let me know if that doesn't answer your question, or if I'm just not clear on it.
He understands what you're saying, he said.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we have about 5 more minutes, so if there are any other questions, please go ahead and feel free to submit those at this time. Otherwise, it probably will be safe to end this webinar. I'll give you a minute to see. Another question popped up. I love when I prompt you all, you come up with questions. One more time, where to find the tribe and their location. So that is going to be in the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which is another agency under the Office of Justice Program. They have a survey of jails in Indian country. If you give me a minute, I may be able to quickly find the URL. I just have to multitask here, and I can put the URL into the chat box for you. All right. So there is a link that has been added for the survey of jails that Tammy had posted, and you can see that and copy it from the chat box. It's actually the very last item that came through at 3:57, and it was sent to everyone. So let me know if you need that information and you're having a difficult time finding it. All right, Julius, there are no other questions, and we are at the 4 o'clock hour.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. And I don't have anything else, but I definitely appreciate your interest in the program, and good luck to you if you are going to apply. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.